All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode. I just rolled out of bed here in my PJs. Actually, not, but yeah, we have a juicy topic today, which is female psychology. What do women really want? And I know you, Leo, have a lot of background studying evolutionary psychology, I would say, more so than I have. And I think it's going to be really interesting to share that aspect. And then I would like to take it also in a little different direction. But maybe you can start in terms of what you've discovered. Maybe you can also start with like, what did you think in the beginning? What do women want when you started out on this journey? Because it's probably evolved a lot. And then how it shifted to what you believe now, based on your understanding.
So yeah, it's a really nice topic, and I think the evolutionary part, I think it's interesting because I always like to have some kind of ground where we can all put our foundations in and not come up with like this wishful thinking, like just come up with random stuff that will make ourselves feel good, or that will bias towards what we think is the reality, let's say. So I like to base myself on science, and that's because, back in the days I was more learning a lot of content in terms of spirituality, and I think it's super biased, and some things are just like, oh, it's like this because we want it like that, because the road is a beautiful place and everyone is thinking about fairy tales and we are all going to live happy and so on and so forth. And for me, that never cut it. And then I need...
So just to clarify the spiritual aspect, like the spiritual explanations that you've heard, that was not enough for you to really feel like it has the substance that
even if they
you were looking for.
Even if they do combine in certain points to say like, okay, yeah, so this does make sense, I think the foundations of why they made sense was not so clear to me. At least for me, that's what I look in the way I see this, in the way I pursue this. So let's take a step back now and let me explain a bit how I'd see back in the days before I start my journey what I think was important and what women wanted. And I would say that the main thing was someone that thinks the same, or someone that does the same things that they do. So I would listen a lot to first things that my friends, female friends, would say that they would like, or that they would say that they are looking for in a guy. But I fail to see that they are saying that because they are triggered by specific things, but they are triggered because they are attracted to this opposite realm, let's say this masculine realm. And they would come to me and say like, yeah, but he's so like this, he's just not like this, like me. So they were also thinking that they were attracted to someone that think like them, failing to see that there needs to be some kind of polarity that brings them together. So that was like really, really strong for me. So I'll be like, oh, now I need to learn this because that's what they like. Now I need to be like this because that's what they like. And it's even funny because I saw like this video on Reels on Instagram of this guy in the gym asking like, oh, what muscles should I train in the gym to get girls or some shit like that. and the girls were all saying like legs, 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 legs. And it's like, no, that's what you train. You train legs. But it's funny. It's just a funny video, but it already shows how we are so biased in terms of understanding the opposite. And I think that gets in the way. So before we go back to the evolutionary parts, do you also relate to that? Is that like something that for you in the beginning was strong also?
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify for you, basically, then what you're saying is that you were basically listening to what your female friends were telling you what they wanted, and it was not actually the thing that they really wanted. It was kind of like they were telling themselves, this is what a good guy should have, this is what I almost like should be interested in. But then deep down they were attracted to the guy that didn't, almost like that did the opposite thing, maybe even. Is that what you were getting at?
Yeah, and just to be a bit more clear also, I'm not saying that is not lead you to attract some specific type of girl, because that did for me. It's like I became more like, let's say, I shift myself more to this like feminine, let's say, idea of who I was, and that attracted girls that were more like bossy, more like masculine-ish. They had more like this energy, and so there was attraction there, of course, but that was shifted in a way that led me to the polarity that I was pushing myself out in the other person. So is it good or bad? I don't know. I can't answer in terms of the attraction itself, but what I can answer is that I was molding myself like that, and that was not necessarily what I wanted to be or where I wanted to go. So for me, in this specific case, I would say yes, because I was trying to manipulate myself into becoming attractive by thinking that that's the way I needed to be.
And it makes perfect sense, right? And the main thing, and I think we're going to come back to that now, is the whole polarity aspect. Like when we talk about sexual attraction, then that's literally what we're talking about. So for you then, going more on the, because you were like, oh, women like a guy that's maybe more sensitive, who can listen to my feelings and etc. And then you naturally move into the more feminine aspects of yourself, which, by the way, guys, we all have both inside of us. It's not just because we're a man, that means we're masculine. Like we have both the feminine and the masculine inside of us. And I would say a lot of, especially if we've grown up as kind of like a nice guy, and this was encouraged to be considerate all the time, to have compassion and to listen and make sure everyone is okay, then a big thing is we're already naturally moved more on the feminine side of the spectrum, right? And then, like you said, one effect of that, or one consequence, is that we attract women in a sexual context that are then more on the masculine side, because that maintains the polarity in a relationship. If we started to attract women that are very feminine, there would just be no polarity, so it wouldn't work. All right, so that's beautiful that you noticed that. And for me, I would say the biggest thing, it's crazy, like the main thing I used to believe that women, so definitely also this familiarity aspect, like, oh, we have to have all these things in common. That was a big one for me. And also I thought it was really about looks. Like for a really long time, I thought, man, if I don't look like a model, I will never get a model looking girlfriend. And then I would tell myself I'd rather be single, I would die single than having to settle for someone that I'm not really interested in. And that really stuck with me for a really long time, even after I found out about the whole pickup stuff, and I knew I could learn these things and I could like work on myself and change, but I still thought, shit, like I'm not good looking enough. And a big part of that was because in childhood, my dad and my younger brother would oftentimes make fun of me for shit. Like, not obviously because they really, like my younger brother more on purpose, my dad not so much, but there were things that they commented on about my appearance that really created a lot of shame for me, right? Like a big one was my nose, my ears, like kind of like how they were like standing off to the sides. And so I also had something with my chest where it's kind of like it's curved more like inwards. So it's not like outwards, right? Like this. And so I was just always very skinny and I looked very frail and I felt just very unattractive. So I thought I have to become this guy who's really jacked and like look good physically to attract those types of women.
I think most guys have that. It's some more than others, but the way we are presented, especially like social media wise, it's mainly like physical, mainly looks. And I think that does play a big role into us thinking what is needed to create this attraction for sure. Yeah. Do you want to add something here, or can I just quickly.
Yeah, we can jump into like what do you feel now has changed for you? And I mean, this was already, I would say, that came through further understanding that you were like, oh look, I'm attracting these girls because I'm moving more onto even further like on the feminine side of the spectrum, and as a result, this is the consequence. But maybe you have some more insight into just from a biological perspective or evolutionary perspective, what is it that women at their core, and let's maybe also talk about like differentiate between their sexual attraction and then there's also the connection aspect and kind of like something more longer term, which I would say we should differentiate between the two because they ask for different things, right?
That's a really interesting one, and I started, being super interested in this topic. And I think one book that is like really, really worth for you to to read. But there's a lot of podcasts also with this guy, so you can still watch and listen. It's called like Bad Men: The Hidden Roots of Sexual Deception, Harassment, and Assault. And the title doesn't give me the full picture of what's the content of the book. But I watched the podcast before, and then I was like, okay, that's interesting. I'm gonna read this whole thing. And he basically explained a bit of like this polarity, this difference between what men are looking in general terms, evolutionary terms, towards women, what women are looking for men. He also explained that this can change with time. Some things can, some things will not, because then it relates to, okay, the woman needs to carry the baby for 9 months to have a child. The man can have multiple childs, like in a day he can make a children, right? So there in itself is already the start of the things that will come from that idea. So like what the man is looking for. So in general terms, man is looking for to spread as much as he can. Woman is trying to find someone that is going to give her security or give her, someone that is reliable to take care of the children, because she's putting 9 months of her life to bring this child, and she also wants to have the best genes in this child in an evolutionary way. So it's like we are not conscious, there's no conscience behind that in a way, but that can shift a little bit. So let's say like women now, they are not so dependent on men to raise the children. So that shifts a little bit, but what he points out here is that those evolutionary things, they're still in the roots of how we behave and how we interact with each other and what we are looking in terms of mating. And there's here something really interesting that he puts out that I never thought in this way, but there are two main categorizations where he's going to say that there is a short-term partner and there's a long-term partner. And there are behaviors that will push us towards being seen as a short-term partner and a long-term partner. And that also plays in how we as men compete against men and how women compete against women. So let's say a lot of like this shaming or whatever it is will come from the woman's side. Of course, it also comes from men, but it will come from woman's side because there is a competition in terms of physicality, the way women look, or so they try to attack each other, let's say, to bring the other values down. So let's say you are with your girlfriend and there's like this girl that maybe she's jealous, she thinks also like super beautiful, let's say, and she'll come to you and say, oh yeah, Jane is such a whore because this and this and that, or they will try to play it in a way to lower the other person's values. And because I'll not go into like, if you really want details, just read the book. I think it's great and you're gonna get a lot out of it. But let's say, I'm not going to say what is the root of this, but then for men, because men are more interested in everything that is like physical and like, so like beauty, if the girl is beautiful or not, and things related to that in general. Women are looking in men, let's say, value, because he can provide, he can take care of the family, like safety and all of that. And so men also, when they try to downplay each other, they will use these things that the women are looking to downplay their friends. So like being physical, being aggressive, getting into fights to show that, oh, I'm the boss and all of that, you know. It's kind of like when you put in the surface level, you see like, oh, it sounds stupid, but we need to remember that this shows up and appears in like really granular ways that sometimes you're not even aware, or most of the times you're not even aware. But what is, from all of that, what are the things that we can see and be like, okay, but how does that relate to what woman wants and what man wants? And does that have like this ingredient or this secret that now that you found the secret, you can, you know, get the woman of your dreams or whatever? And that's the thing, because when we are talking about value, and let's focus here on men, like that we are seeing in terms of our value, let's say that we can bring, or in terms of hierarchy in a specific thing or whatever it is that we have a multitude of personalities and we have a multitude of things that, let's say, women or even men like or enjoy. And so when a lot of people read this book and they will see like value, they think like money, job, car, all of that. But that's one value for one specific group. And that is going to attract also one specific group of women that are looking into that. So they fail to see, and that's where we see a lot of like these red pill guys going through, like, oh, work on yourself, just go to the gym and get jacked and make a lot of money and blah, blah, blah. They fail to see that if you are the best League of Legends player, you also have a lot of value in that specific realm, right? So they fail to see that there is a bunch of different aspects of life that will lead you to have value. And those are the things that you don't need to mold yourself. You just need to really accept that you like or that you enjoy doing that specific activity. And then that is going to, in itself, create this value that doesn't necessarily mean it's the same as the woman's value. Because, again, we have different ways of going about life, different things that relates to us. So let's say a guy that is super into motocross. And he does that and he's good at that. That's his passion. He's pursuing that. Doesn't mean that he's going to relate with a girl that is also into motocross. That's not the thing. But some girl that likes an adventurous person, or that she will value like this kind of behavior, let's say. And then that in an evolutionary way plays a role where this guy is in that specific realm. He is seen as someone that is valuable. And the same thing we can push now towards women, where, okay, so her value is more, let's say, related in evolutionary psychology. Let's make this clear as much as we can. If it's the beauty that is being seen, what kind of beauty? So you go to Eastern Europe, there's like this trend of women that puts a lot of like fillers in their lips. And it's like, oh, now she's beautiful. And you can see that only plays most of the time in the realm of women itself. Because most men that I know, they're like, I don't like it, you know? But they created these standards, and they are like competing against each other in these standards, let's say. Well, there must be some men that like it, but whatever. But then you go to other parts of the world, and that will not be the case. You'll not see it. You'll not see this thing coming up. So this is always like malleable. It's not like a fixed thing that is like, oh, you have to have cars, money, and this, and now you're a value man. Or if you're a girl, you have to do this and this and this, and do a boob job, and so on and so forth, and you're going to get. So this, yeah. So I think this is an important point. It doesn't give us a proper answer of, okay, but what do they want in terms of like specific advice, but it gives us a way to understand what is coming on behind. But on top of that, I think there is like this thing that I brought up in the beginning about short-term and long-term that are also interesting to look at, because different behaviors from different, let's say, women or men will categorize you, or will be pushing you more towards people from the other sex, seeing you as someone that fits here or fits there. And that also plays in a role on attraction and creating these things. But yeah, is that clear? Like, do you have any comments on that one? Just so I don't bore everyone to death for 30 minutes straight.
Just talking. I think there was a lot of amazing stuff in there. And I think what's really valuable for everyone to understand is that we don't need to fall into a specific category in order to be attractive. Like there is, right? It's not just like the guy that has all the cars and has the status and has all the money. Like that will attract, like you said, one particular type of like group of women that are looking specifically for that. So then it's really about like, what do I want to do as a man and follow that authentically? Because ultimately when I do that, I follow my passions, I do the things that I care about, then you will do things that are cool ultimately to some women that will look at you and be like, wow, this is really attractive. So I think that's really valuable to do, to actually trust that whatever we're already inclined to do will actually get us to the woman, and not think, oh, we have to become someone else. We have to mold ourselves in a particular way in order to attract women. So it's just about seeing, okay, what do these women respond to? And it's also like, do we necessarily want women, like if we want something more than just a hookup, right, with a hot woman, like if we actually want to have a relationship, and are the women that care about the money, the status, and the cars and whatever, are those the types of women that are a good fit necessarily for a relationship? Probably not, for something more long-term, because they already care about so much of the, let's call it superficial, surface level things. And then when in a relationship, you care about connection, going deeper, right? Like actually attuning and relating to each other. And the question is, are those the types of women you really want to meet then? So I think that is huge. And it's interesting because I was on a date the other night, and this woman, she was telling me how, in terms of like skin or like the body type and complexion and stuff, we talked about how things are in Colombia right now, where it's all about like big booty, fake boobs, just like bigger is more attractive. And then you go to Korea and you want like a skinny kind of white woman, like white is like as pale as possible. And that's the most attractive thing. And so just seeing that, we're no longer physically attached to a certain location these days. A lot of us, you and I, we have jobs where we can actually travel and we can live in any place in the world almost. And that allows us to also go somewhere where we're already like high value, just because of the way we look, of what we bring to the table without having to do anything else. So that's important to understand, not to say, oh, just because no woman here likes me doesn't mean you're not lovable or worthy or attractive. No, it's just like, maybe these are not the women for you, right? So for me, I'm very attracted to Latina women because they're more in their feminine already, in that essence and flowing with life. And that really is a turn on for me. And so I'm kind of looking more into that. And then when I see German girls here, they're kind of more like, oftentimes I've experienced more like stuck up and kind of like rigid, and sometimes more of a masculine front. So it's more like I'm talking to a dude. They're not very like feminine, flowing and open and receptive. And then to me, it's like, am I going to try to make it work with a German woman necessarily? I don't have to, right? So what am I looking for? What do I want? So I think that was really cool that you explained it in that way. And also the type of how we measure ourselves and how we compete, like for different things. Women compete for different things, looks wise, beauty wise, and looking youthful maybe as well. And then for men, it's more about like status, about strength, about, like maybe the stoicness too. Like this whole movement of like being stoic and rigid, and we want to be that guy, which is ultimately, if we look at it, it's just a very extreme of the masculine, like all the way to the end of the spectrum, right? And on the other side, where the feminine side, all the way to the end, the extreme would be a woman that's completely crazy because she's completely all over the place. Like that's the extremes. And so we want to find, who do we want to attract? And also, where do we feel most comfortable ourselves? Because for you, when you noticed, hey, I am attracting women right now, there's sexual polarity, but I'm noticing I'm kind of more like, maybe very in touch with my feelings, very vulnerable, but also very considerate. And just like very on the feminine side of the spectrum, and then you realize I actually feel more comfortable over here, so I want to move over a little bit, so I have access to the parts of me that are maybe more dominant, more leading, right? And then the women will start to follow again. So recognizing where do you land on the spectrum, what really turns you on, and then allowing that to come out more and more.
I think this becomes also, like we always point out, and I think you guys are going to be tired of that, but that's good because it should be awareness. So it's like I was not being fulfilled in my relationships just because I was following something that I had to, instead of just allowing myself to be authentically, to live authentically. So for example, even like considering, oh, now I need to become vegan and need to be like this eco activist because that's what most of these girls that I know they are doing. So I can get in this group and be with them and do like all of this sort of shit. And it's just like, but I don't care about that. I'm all into eating meat. I love meat. I love chicken, whatever. I'm not going to the politics here. Like you do whatever you want. But it's more like in terms that I have to shift myself to this because this will lead me to that. And that I think is a low move. The nice guys don't see it when they say like, oh, these bad guys, they are like treating women so bad, but they don't see that themselves are pushing away things that they want to express or they want to do to get their way into a relationship, let's say. So it's not that they are like this god guy that is like so good and blah, 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 blah. No, they're manipulating in a deeper level that they can't even see it. They're manipulating their way into getting to that. And yeah, that's why I think like learning all of this or understanding this is important for our self-awareness, for us to look back to us and be like, okay, where do I fit into this? Because of course, we are talking here about science, we are talking here about studies that have been done, we are talking here about average numbers. We're not talking here about every specific individual. And I think that's also where people get caught up because it's like, oh, I'm hearing he's talking about this, but I see examples of this being different here and here and here and there. Yes, of course, you see that everywhere. But we are talking here about the spectrum of where we live in. If you want to talk about individuals, okay, let's stay here for like days and days discussing every single human being that exists in this planet with their uniqueness. Of course, it's not like that. But now, making it interesting again, let's come back to what you were saying in terms of like this competition of where both lands. And that will put and differentiate how we, let's say, see woman as a short or long-term mating partner, or also the opposite. And this was actually really interesting because for women, when they tend to show themselves out there more, they tend to fall into a category of being seen by men as short term. And we're talking here about evolutionary level. So it's not like a judgment that I'm looking at a woman like this and she's posting naked pictures on the internet. I'm going to see her as a short term. It's like, it's deeper than that. It's in a layer that is a bit deeper than that. So what he says in the book is that men, when they would see this kind of behaviors, they would tend to see that woman as a short-term partner and that she's putting herself out there in this way because one of the main fears, evolutionary fears of man is to raise a children that is not his own. So when there is the possibility of raising someone that is actually not his son, and that he sees that the other person is someone that is, let's say, capable of cheating on him or sleeping with other men or doing things like that, that is a really, really trigger for them. And then also he's going to describe like all the bad things that comes from that. So like assault, lying, like kind of trying to hold the woman, and be like, oh, you can't go out, you can't do this, get off social media. The behaviors in men to try to stop that. And it's just interesting to understand the complexity of it and how yeah, all these behaviors come back to like these roots, evolutionary roots. And yeah, he's going to explain. He's also going to say, oh, this is not an excuse to this. And I think in this book, there's a lot of parts that he's going to talk in a way that he's trying not to be canceled, which I understand. He doesn't want to lose his job. But it triggers me a bit sometimes. It's like, okay, bro, you're just like showing the results of your study. You don't need to say sorry for that. You saw like monkeys eating banana and you're like, okay, 3 monkeys ate 1 banana, 2 monkeys ate. It's like, yeah, you don't need to be sorry about that. But yeah, it's interesting. So I think that also shows a bit like of why I have some single women, like some single woman friends, and they always complain like, it's so hard to find like a guy that wants to stick around or whatever. And they think that they need to go on social media and show how valuable they are by showing like their bodies and showing like this, let's say, physical appearance to lure in men. But they also fail to recognize that evolutionarily, if that's a word, this will make a lot of like these horny dudes be like, oh yeah, I just want to get quick off, and so it's interesting. I'm not saying that she's never going to find someone long term because of that. She can, of course. Like I said, there are many different people in this world. But in average terms, she's putting herself out there to be seen as the short-term person. And that goes for men also. That men can be seen as short-term and men can be seen a long-term. So let's say a man that is like these guys from high school, that they are cool and they're like jacked and whatever it is. They don't have like much security. They don't have much like this value to as a provider in a way. So they are seen more like a short-term thing because you can't really rely on him. You can't really rely on him in average numbers, of course, again, to be the guy that is going to take care of the children, that is going to that knows what he wants, that is true to himself, that it's more like what they would look at someone that is a long-term partner, And that I think gets also in the way of, and this is a long discussion, I think it's another discussion, we have like many videos popping up right now on YouTube about it, where it's like women that are making more money, women that have more like this financial freedom, they can take care of themselves. They find it hard to find a long-term partner because this guy that was supposed to have these qualities, they don't need it, or these qualities is so difficult to find because they are already making so much more than most men that it's hard for them to find like a long-term partner. It's usually like just this thing and it doesn't work. So it stays in the short term, let's say. So it's also super interesting to see that. And just bringing to a more specific case, I have a friend that one of his fears of like getting into a relationship is because he thinks that women just wants these short-term guys, but they can't make them like stay, or they can't make them commit with these guys because these guys have so many options that they will not stay with that girl, that she will lower her standards to stay with a long-term guy, let's say. But this is a wrong assumption. It's an assumption that there is a better and a worst place to be. Like you can be short-term is better than you just settle down and stay with long-term. No, you are looking for different things and levels that you don't even recognize. So let's say a girl that will see like this guy doing really well with her children and being like playful, and she'll really be like, it's not anxious, I forgot the word, excited about that specific thing. It's going to be hot for her. She's going to be like, wow, But and that falls in this long-term part. But the body is also giving this excitement in terms of that, like a girl that is looking for a jacked guy in the high school, like throwing the football ball in case of America, and they're like, oh yeah, like this guy, and makes her feel like all these things. Those are seen in both realms. So there's no better or worse. There's just the places where you are putting yourself into. So it comes back again to also these false ideas of things that we need to do in order to be the most attractive or to do what the woman wants, let's say.
Which is why this whole education is so important, right? To really understand. And that's kind of why I want to two things I want to mention. One, this whole idea of awareness, like it's important that we keep reinforcing this. Like that's how we learn, and we actually need the reinforcement, because the thinking aspect of our mind usually tries to check out as soon as it thinks it understands something. And to really understand this, to really have a known experience of this, we need to keep coming back. That's why even us talking about this now, it's almost that in itself is already us doing shadow work and actually bringing things to your awareness that were not even clear before. All right. So for example, this thing, and we also have to understand then with women, that's kind of like the second point I want to make, is we're all like, there is no, this is the right thing, or short term is the way to be, or long term is the way to be. It's really, we're going through different phases. Like a girl who's 19, who just wants to have fun, she might just want to fuck like the football players in high school, you know? And a woman who's 30, who feels like, oh, I actually want to have kids, my clock is ticking, I want to settle down. Like she's going to look for something really different. That doesn't mean just because she's 30 now, it's like, oh, she's getting old and that's why blah, blah. You know, some guys will turn that into another excuse or another reason why long-term is not desirable. But it's just like we have to recognize we go through different phases. And same for us guys. Like maybe for us, it starts later. Maybe when we're 40, we start thinking we're 35 or whatever. We start thinking about, I want to have a family. I want to settle down with a woman. And then we don't just look for the young 19-year-olds that literally have no life experience, that cannot even provide the things that we're looking for. And we might look for someone who's a little bit older, who's a little bit more mature, who's worked on themselves, has like emotionally developed, and not someone who's just like all over the place. So it's really important to see all the nuances. And something that I also wanted to kind of tie this back to is just in general, like a deeper layer, like not saying like this is the right way, the wrong way to look at this, but just another perspective to kind of see how this whole attraction game unfolds. And I think what you already mentioned is, in terms of the short term, something that's more noticeable is when we, as a man, when we want to fall into that category of like, oh, I'm viewed as short term, some of the things, basically all you really need is that sexual attraction. And that is usually what you see in, let's say, a football player. He just doesn't really care about long-term, his future. He just like has fun in the now. He's playing his football, hangs out with his buddies, gets drunk, smokes weed, whatever, and that's enough. But he has this sense of like, he's not afraid to say no. He's not afraid to push a girl away.
Social validation.
He's not afraid
also
to set boundaries. Yes, social validation, not afraid to push people away. And that backbone, that's really the thing that makes him sexually attractive. That he's so in touch with what he wants in that phase of his life. That's the thing that really creates the attraction in, like, for women in him. And then obviously if a guy is more viewed as a potential mate long term, like for relationships, and he's the provider and stuff, different things are important. So not only, so if you are more, let's say, in touch with your heart, you can be very compassionate, more considerate, you know how to be with children, right? Which the football player maybe doesn't know. Like those are things that put you already more into the category of he's a provider. He's a guy that I can see myself having children with. Now, ultimately, if you really want to be the guy that has absolute choice with women, then it's important to develop both. And usually we have one of the two developed. So for a lot of nice guys, it's kind of like the provider type that's already more like, oh, I care about your feelings. I can listen to what you're saying, and da-da-da-da-da, right? And then it's important to just come back into balance. And that's why what you mentioned before is so crucial, to see where we get triggered by what other men are doing. That is a key thing to look at. What is the thing in other men that is triggering me? And I had this with my business partner, who was extremely selfish, just caring about himself. And like I felt so treated so unfairly. And I was like, how can you be such a selfish prick? Like not even give a shit about our relationship. It's just about business. There's no friendship whatsoever. And I realized I was triggered so hard because I had such a rejection to those aspects inside of me that were selfish, because there was so much shame for me around that based on my childhood, the way I grew up, that I tried to push that away so hard. And the more I started to bring that in and be like, okay, I am selfish and I'm going to do this thing and I'm aware that I'm being selfish and this is purely for my own need, the more I accepted that, the more I could embrace it, the more it transformed my relationship to him and with that quality itself. So it's almost, you get the positive aspects distilled from that quality. So if someone is really selfish, he can be very assertive. He knows how to take care of himself. And that's kind of what it transforms into then when you bring that quality back in. So that's really powerful for everyone like watching this to kind of take away from this, like actually make a list of the things that really trigger you. Because in most cases, these are things that you have denied within yourself. And now you try to push them away and make them, those are the bad things that we should get away from and only focus on the stuff that you already want to believe is the right thing to do. So instead, and we said this before, we're not looking for the right way. We're looking for a way that allows us to embrace all of life exactly the way it is happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just so we make it clear in terms of this short-term and long-term part, is that you can have both feminine and masculine energy on both sides and still be in that side. So for example, we gave the short-term example as someone that is highly, let's say, have highly masculine energy, but it could be also the opposite. And also the same for like this long-term. It's like he can have a bunch of like masculine energy. So it's like he kills the bear, he does all of this shit, but he's at the same time reliable, he's trustworthy. So it's like, so it's not related to, oh, I'm a nice guy, but I pushed myself away from having masculine things. That's why I'm in the long term. No, it's not only based on that, but it's also the fact that you are in this category of like showing yourself in this way instead of showing yourself in that way. So there's a bunch of nuances, and if you want to really get to the nitty and gritty of this, just read the book and go into that. But I think if you're trying to find, reading this type of content because you're trying to find advices, then you are in the wrong place. Because when I looked at advices that he gives in this book, I'm like, okay, bro, that's where you lost me, you know? Like, I was with you when you were talking about science, but as you start like giving advice, I'm just like, yeah, I wouldn't follow them, to be honest. And that's because like you might be listening to the podcast and thinking, okay, but what do women want? You didn't say what they want. Tell me, give me the code. And it's like, the question itself, we are showing to you that the question itself is already being asked from a biased perspective, a perspective that is trying to put the choices into the other person. It's not like what the woman wants, it's what you want to provide to this world, how you want to show up, how you want to live this life. And women that are aligned with you, they will show up. And that's where like I think the strong and beautiful bonds that we see in this world, even if it's short term or long term, you choose, they're going to show up because they are coming up from this clarity, not only from you, but from the woman. It's not easy. It's not easy to find someone that is in the same path as you, or that appreciates, like a man that truly appreciates a woman showing her up in her true feminine essence. Or a woman that is able to truly appreciate a man just showing his masculine side. It's really hard these days because we think that everyone should have like this equal in everything. You know, like, oh no, my boyfriend, he acts like this all the time. It's like, yeah, but it's his side.
He's a dude.
Yeah, like what do you expect?
He's not a woman. Right. Oh man, that was such a beautiful point. Really, that was like right on point. Shit. What you were just saying. And it's really this sense of like trying, like we're all, like you said, we're already giving our responsibility away to someone else and saying, tell me what I need to be, tell me what I need to do in order to be attractive. We completely throw away this idea of, let me first figure out what I want. Like we already think it's impossible to find and experience what we want if we went after the things that we already enjoy doing. That's the underlying premise from which we're operating. So until we stop operating from that and we come to a place of saying, I'm going to figure out what I want. These are the things that I want in a woman. These are the things, and that's why it's helpful to actually think about this and write it out. What are the things that you want in a woman? And then to look at how are you showing up, and is that going to attract that type of woman? Because if you want a woman who's very feminine and flowing and vulnerable and, very touchy-feely, whatever, all that stuff, and then you show up as exactly that type of man, then sexually there's not going to be any polarity. There's no attraction in that. So that means that for you, then you have to actually move a little bit in the other direction. That doesn't mean anything is wrong with you. It's just about what do you want? You really have the freedom to choose what you want. And then based on that, you can actually act. Like you go in this direction, you go in that direction, but then you actually get to experience what it is that you want. So let's not forget that and think, oh, we just give it up to the woman and then they decide who we need to be. Because then we always live in a place of should, like we should all over ourselves. It's like, I need to be this way and that way. And the freedom, the joy, the love, the peace, everything that we are hoping to get from that is inaccessible. And that's why so many people are just not happy in their relationships, because they think that's the thing they're getting. And then ultimately what they have to do is they have to tolerate, they have to settle, they have to sacrifice because the woman is dictating the tone. And they're like, I really don't feel comfortable here. She's right. Like I'm not in my essence. I don't feel really alive. And it's really about not going for, and I think a reason why we're doing this is because we're also really tired of constantly, we've been trying to adjust ourselves for pretty much our whole life. Like when we reach puberty and we saw this is what the cool kids do and this is me and I'm not cool and I have to do all this stuff. And we've been trying to change and to change, hoping that would eventually get us the validation, the recognition, the women, the attraction. And when that doesn't happen, then we get really tired and we're just like, I just want a fucking solution. Just give me the thing, the right thing to do. And this approach is not about feeling good in the short term. This will make you feel incredible and truly alive in the long term, what we're proposing here. And if you want more information on that, just join the Facebook group, which is somewhere linked under this video. And we can talk about this. Just send me a DM. But in the long term, this will make you feel truly alive. But in the short term, this is going to be looking really at the shit that's been going on, really trying to understand that. And that's not necessarily comfortable because all these emotions that have been pushing you in trying to find the right answer, the right solution, right, to the problem, that's the thing we first need to deal with. And that's obviously uncomfortable at first. But that's a necessary step to really mold yourself into the man that is truly attractive. It's not about like quickly learning the gimmicks. And that's what pickup is doing oftentimes. Just like learn this one thing and then you, like this opener is going to get her attention. Wow, now you have her attention. Great. But what about all the rest? Like, do you know how to have an amazing relationship? No. With this work that we're proposing, like actually going deeper, that will turn you into the man that has access to all these different parts of you. And just something to share as an example, maybe to kind of conclude this, is when I went on the stage the other night, something I had a lot of shame around when I was growing up was just my sexuality, because I felt so unattractive. I would never think about like talking dirty to a girl just like at a bar, like maybe in the bedroom, but maybe not even there, just like almost hoping somehow it's going to work out. And so when I went on this date the other night, what I noticed is I was sitting with the girl in the beginning. It was like normal conversation, kind of like factual stuff. And then at some point I really I was talking about like, are you a good kisser? And like I was smelling her and all these things. And it became a lot more touchy-feely. And at some point I was really whispering these things into her ear that I would like to do with her in that moment. And I noticed the shame and this discomfort that I used to have was just not there anymore. It felt so natural and effortless to do that. And that's ultimately the point where we want to get you to, because I was a nice guy. So I was always the guy who was considerate and like always care about her feelings, always make sure it's like, you're not taking advantage in any way. Don't be selfish. Don't be a selfish prick. And so it's really about what do I want? And I knew this is an aspect of me that just needed more developing. So I focused more on that. That doesn't mean something is wrong with me. It's just like that part is just a little bit underdeveloped. So let me focus on developing that, and then I can come back into balance. And now I have access to all the potential. Now I can be a guy who can be viewed as someone short-term if I want that, because I know how to access those parts inside of me. And I can also be viewed as someone long-term if that's what I want. Then I'll show up in a way that I know is going, and I'm not doing this consciously. Like, this is important to understand. It's not a gimmick. It's not a learned tactic. It's like, oh, if I show up this way, then I'm going to be viewed long-term. No, it's like, what do I want? And because I'm so clear on that, I know what my intention is going in. That then translates into how I show up. And then I know I'm going to be perceived that way. But if you don't have that, if you only have access to one side of things, then you can't really fully show up in that way. You don't have the room, right? The scope to go in all these different places.
It's like an alignment. You are aligned, and then you show up aligned to what you want. And yeah, I think that like those examples are perfect because I've seen so much of that. I've seen so many people like struggling in dating because they want a person that is just like that. Like they're super feminine, but she also needs to make 5K a month like I do because I worked so hard to get where I am and blah, 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 and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, bro, why? They don't even know how to answer. They don't even know what it is because they don't even know themselves what they are looking for. What's just like, there's such a lack of self-awareness, and they are trying to find the answers to those things on the outside. And that's never going to happen. You're just going to get triggered back and forth without understanding why this life is so hard, why dating is so hard. It's because you are putting yourself so much into the other person. And that's where you ultimately is explaining that when you come back to yourself and to seeing the things that you can't access and how you access that and how you can be aligned to yourself and how you have this full range of emotions, of actions, of behaviors where you choose because you are aligned that within yourself and not from the outside. And that's where everything shifts. That's when you stop thinking so much about how to live your life or how to live your dating life, and you just live and you just date and you just enjoy. And that's when we say like, oh, there's no need for a pickup line. There's no need for all of that because you are that. You are in that moment. You were saying hi. You were saying whatever you want. You can still say funny shit. You know, from time to time, you just go and say something funny because that's how you feel. And yeah, okay, it's a fucking pickup line, but it doesn't have the purpose that it has when you are trying to learn this, when you're trying to incorporate this from the outside. And that's, I think, is ultimately what everyone wants, not only women or men, but it's like coming back into alignment within yourself and showing up as you want.
And then it's really an authentic piece of who you are. Like, even if it's something like a pickup line, which people teach in pickup, let's say, because I noticed yesterday I was talking to a client about that, and he's like, well, this thing that you said about the kissing was kind of like seeding the idea that, you know, like maybe at some point you're going to kiss her. And I was like, I never learned this thing. Like, I never told a girl that I actually told her that in the conversation. I was like, are you a good kisser? And then at some point I was just like, okay, I'm just going to kiss you then. And then I went in and kissed her. So, but it was not something that I had learned. It was actually something that authentically comes through me. And that's when you see where you're describing this shift of the things that are push-pull and the things that are planting this idea, like all the stuff that's taught in pickup can actually be an authentic thing, and it does not come from a place of inauthenticity anymore. Mm-hmm. That's when it comes truly through you as an expression of who you are and what you want to let out in that moment. So that's kind of what we're trying to lead you here with all of this content. And if that stuff resonates, definitely like check out the Facebook group underneath, subscribe to the channel, and just come back. We're trying to post these videos once a week. And I think we'll do another episode on this because I didn't even get to the stuff I wanted to really talk about, to provide another perspective on this, like even a deeper layer of what this all means and how women and men, like this dance, how it's actually bringing us to a whole nother level of coming home and really coming into ourselves. But maybe we'll make this a part 2 of this video at some
I like
point.
that.
So
yeah, let's lure them in.
Yeah.
Like this video. Let's put like, if we get 1 million likes, we do the episode 2.
yes, with 1 million likes, episode number 2 will be coming up in a few weeks.
It's doable, guys. Let's make it happen.
Just a milli.